How does a rock legend get fired from the very band he helped catapult into superstardom? Not just dismissed quietly, but pushed aside like a forgotten piece of history. Lindsey Buckingham wasn't just a guitarist or a singer. He was the creative engine behind Fleetwood Mac's meteoric rise. The visionary, the perfectionist, the one who shaped their sound in the studio and elevated their music into chart-topping, record-breaking, emotionally gut-wrenching anthems. And then, suddenly, he was gone. No farewell tour, no thank you, no public gratitude from his bandmates, just silence. When word broke in 2018 that Buckingham had been kicked out of Fleetwood Mac, fans were floored. How could the man behind Go Your Own Way, Big Love, and the haunting guitar intro of Never Going Back Again be gone? And more importantly, why? At first, rumors swirled. Some blamed ego. Others pointed to tensions with longtime bandmate and former lover, Stevie Nicks. Whispers of control, conflict, and unresolved resentment began to spill from the cracks. But the deeper you dig, the messier it gets. This wasn't just a firing. This was a fracture in the soul of one of rock music's most iconic bands. And according to Lindsey himself, it didn't just end a career, it tarnished his legacy. But what really happened behind the scenes? What led to the final blow between bandmates who had survived love affairs, breakups, betrayals, and decades of dysfunction? Was it a power struggle, a personal vendetta, or something even darker? Today, we're peeling back the layers to expose the full truth. The story of Lindsey Buckingham's fallout with Fleetwood Mac is one of genius, heartbreak, and bitter irony, and once you hear it, you may never look at the band the same way again. Before we dive into the heartbreak and chaos, make sure to like this video if you've ever felt betrayed by people who once called you family, and drop a comment. Do you think Fleetwood Mac without Lindsey ever truly worked? Now, let's uncover the story the headlines never told. Lindsey Buckingham's exit from Fleetwood Mac wasn't just another band breakup. It was a public unraveling of a decades-long story filled with brilliance, bitterness, and betrayal. In early 2018, news broke that he had been fired from the band. And it wasn't just a quiet departure due to creative differences. It was sudden, severe, and undeniably personal. The most baffling part, Lindsey had no idea it was coming. According to him, he was preparing for an upcoming tour, discussing logistics, planning the set lists, and expecting business as usual. But then came the blindside. He received a call from the band's manager. Not a meeting, not a group discussion. A call, one that would end his journey with the group he had helped turn into rock royalty, Fleetwood Mac, without its architect. The thought was jarring. Buckingham's voice, songwriting, and guitar work were inseparable from the band's most defining records. Think about The Chain, that tension-filled buildup, that haunting outro. That was Lindsey, or Tusk, an experimental, chaotic masterpiece that only someone like Buckingham could have dreamed up and made real, and yet they let him go. The band's statement was vague. They didn't elaborate on the reason for the firing, merely citing the ever-familiar phrase, musical differences. But fans weren't buying it. Musical differences? After over 40 years of ups and downs, now they draw the line. It didn't add up. Soon, Buckingham spoke out. In interviews, he didn't hold back. He claimed Stevie Nicks had issued an ultimatum. Either he leaves or she does. Allegedly, during a MusiCares event honoring the band, Nicks was offended by Lindsey's reaction to her acceptance speech. Some said he laughed during her speech. Others said it was simply his body language. Whatever it was, it struck a nerve. And suddenly, decades of unresolved tension came crashing to the surface. Think about that for a second. Two people who had once been lovers, who wrote songs about each other, who performed those songs on stage every night in front of thousands, while harboring heartbreak and resentment. And now, one tiny incident, just a look, a chuckle, a sigh, had apparently been the final straw. But there's more. Lindsey claimed he wasn't given the opportunity to fix things, that no conversation took place, that the rest of the band, including Mick Fleetwood and Christine McVie, stood by Stevie's decision. In his words, they lost their perspective and chose comfort over history. And the betrayal stung deeper because of just how tight Fleetwood Mac had once been. These weren't just colleagues. They were battle-scarred veterans who had survived addiction, infidelity, financial chaos, and even violence together. They had lived in the same houses, recorded albums in the most dysfunctional environments imaginable, and yet still managed to create timeless music. Lindsey's firing wasn't just a business decision, it was a personal severing, and it came with consequences. In a bombshell lawsuit filed just months after his firing, Buckingham accused Fleetwood Mac of breach of fiduciary duty, breach of oral contract, and intentional interference with prospective economic advantage. In plain English, he was suing the people he once called family for cutting him out, both emotionally and financially. The lawsuit revealed that the upcoming tour, originally supposed to include him, would generate tens of millions of dollars. And with him out of the picture, he stood to lose more than just dignity. He stood to lose millions. Money he'd helped earn with a lifetime of songwriting, touring, and brand building. And let's not forget, they replaced him with two musicians, Mike Campbell from Tom Petty's Heartbreakers and Neil Finn from Crowded House. It took two to replace one. That alone says everything. What shocked fans even more was Lindsey's emotional openness in the aftermath. In multiple interviews, he confessed that the firing broke him, not just professionally, but spiritually. He'd spent his whole life crafting a legacy around Fleetwood Mac. He wasn't just in the band, he had shaped it, and now he was being erased from it. He said, and I quote, "It was the first time I ever really felt like I might be dying. Emotionally, it was a death." For an artist so known for his stoic brilliance and quiet control, those words hit hard, but this was just the beginning. Because while Lindsey was navigating lawsuits and emotional fallout, something else was brewing beneath the surface, something even fans didn't see coming. And what happened next would leave the rock world reeling. To understand Lindsey's eventual firing, you have to understand the chaos that made Rumors what it was. At the time, the band's personal lives were unraveling. Christine McVie had ended her marriage with bassist John McVie. Mick Fleetwood was navigating his own crumbling relationship. But the most volatile split, Lindsey and Stevie, they had broken up, but still shared the stage and the studio. Imagine producing an album where every lyric is a dagger aimed at your ex-lover who's singing it right next to you. That was the dynamic between Lindsey and Stevie. And somehow, they turned that emotional warfare into sonic magic. Songs like Go Your Own Way and Dreams weren't just hits, they were public diary entries. Lindsey would sing about Stevie's independence with biting frustration, while Stevie responded with lyrics that sounded like graceful revenge. But as the band rose in fame, the fractures deepened. Cocaine, egos, and control battles became part of their daily reality. Lindsey's drive for perfection clashed with Stevie's desire for creative freedom. Christine often played mediator. Mick tried to keep the ship afloat, but no one could. Deny that without Lindsey's leadership in the studio, Fleetwood Mac might have fallen apart much earlier, and yet his perfectionism came with a price. By 1987, Lindsey had reached a breaking point. The band was preparing for a major tour following the release of Tango in the Night, which featured hits like Big Love and Little Lies. But Lindsey, burned out and emotionally drained, walked away. His decision shocked the group. They had just released a commercially successful album, but Lindsey said he couldn't do it anymore. Not with the toxic energy, the unresolved personal conflicts, and the creative tension. He went solo, releasing albums that showcased his eclectic talent and meticulous production skills. While his solo work never reached the chart-topping heights of Fleetwood Mac, it was critically praised. Songs like Trouble and Holiday Road became cult favorites, cementing his legacy as an innovative musician, unafraid to break molds. Still, the ghost of Fleetwood Mac followed him. 10 years later, in 1997, the unthinkable happened. Fleetwood Mac reunited for The Dance, an MTV special that led to a wildly successful tour. To the public, it looked like a fairy tale reunion. The core members were back. The energy was electric. But behind the scenes, old wounds hadn't healed. Stevie and Lindsey were cordial, but the tension was always lurking. In interviews, Stevie admitted she had put boundaries in place. "We're never getting back together," she said. "We're not even friends. We're bandmates." Lindsey, meanwhile, continued to pour himself into the music. He produced and arranged with the same obsessive intensity, keeping the band musically tight, even if emotionally frayed. And then, just as things seemed stable, everything fell apart again. In 2018, fans were stunned to learn that Lindsey had been fired from Fleetwood Mac. There was no tour announcement with him, no press conference explaining why, just silence, until Lindsey himself spoke out. In a Rolling Stone interview, he revealed the truth, or at least his side of it. "I was told I would not be coming on the tour," he said. "They didn't even give me a reason. It was just over." He went further. According to Lindsey, Stevie Nicks had issued an ultimatum. Either he goes or she does. The catalyst? A smirk. During a MusiCares tribute event, Stevie felt Lindsey was mocking her on stage as she gave a speech. That moment, brief and subtle, reportedly led to the band's decision. Mick Fleetwood, always the diplomat, tried to stay neutral, but in the end, the band sided with Stevie. Lindsey was out, and he was livid. "This wasn't about music," he said. "This was personal, and it destroyed my legacy with the band." He filed a lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. It was eventually settled privately, but no amount of money could undo the emotional toll. The firing may have seemed sudden, but insiders say the rift had been growing for years. Lindsey, always a perfectionist, had clashed with Stevie over song choices, tour schedules, and creative direction. Meanwhile, Stevie reportedly felt that Lindsey's behavior had grown increasingly dismissive, but was it really about a smirk? According to several sources, the moment at the MusiCares event was just the tipping point. Stevie allegedly saw it as a sign of disrespect. After years of tension she could no longer tolerate. Lindsey believed it was a power play, pure and simple. Some fans speculated that the real issue was deeper. Was Stevie resentful of Lindsey's influence over the band's sound? Was Lindsey unable to accept Stevie's growing dominance in the group's image? The truth may never be fully known, but one thing was clear. The bond was broken, perhaps beyond repair. Lindsey didn't hold back in the media. He spoke candidly about feeling betrayed, about losing the one thing that defined much of his career. "This was my family," he said, "and they threw me out without a real conversation." Stevie, meanwhile, released her own statement, denying she had forced anyone's hand. "I never asked for him to be fired," she said. "I just said I couldn't work with him anymore." The fan base exploded. Debates raged online. Was Lindsey the victim of band politics or the architect of his own undoing? Even Mick Fleetwood, usually the peacekeeper, admitted that reconciliation seemed unlikely. "I think Lindsey and Fleetwood Mac are done," he said in 2021. That ship has sailed. In 2019, Lindsey underwent emergency heart surgery, a moment that nearly silenced his music forever. He lost his voice for a time, but he recovered and returned to performing with a renewed sense of clarity. Then came the news that shattered what remained of the band's unity. Christine McVie passed away in 2022. Lindsey's tribute was heartfelt. "Christine was the soul of Fleetwood Mac," he wrote. "I will miss her forever." But even in grief, no reunion emerged. Stevie, Lindsey, Mick, and John each went their separate ways. The magic was over. The wounds ran too deep. And yet, Lindsey continues to create. He still tours, still writes, still pushes boundaries. But the shadow of Fleetwood Mac looms large. In his own words, "My legacy is tarnished, but the music speaks for itself." In the end, Lindsey Buckingham's story isn't just about being fired from a band. It's about the emotional cost of greatness. It's about what happens when passion becomes pain, when loyalty is tested, when art and ego collide. He gave his soul to Fleetwood Mac, crafted its sound, carried its legacy, and in return, he was shown the door. But does that erase his impact? Hardly. Sometimes the people who build the foundation get left out of the spotlight. Sometimes legacies are rewritten by politics, not truth. But if music is the real judge, then Lindsey Buckingham's legacy is not tarnished. It's immortal. If you made it this far, drop a comment. Was Fleetwood Mac stronger with Lindsey, or was the split inevitable? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold stories and behind-the-scenes truths from the world of music. We'll see you in the next one.